Over the course of the last 10 seasons, would you consider NC State football to be a growing brand of success? EA Sports certainly does.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right, $150 with any winning $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Happy Tuesday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. Hope everyone had a very safe Memorial Day holiday. We are back here with you on Tuesday, and we are discussing this EA Sports college football monetary revenue share tier that came out, I believe it was the end of last week. So the use of this tier, as you see here, there's 4 tiers, and it's broken out by AP poll finishes dating back to 2014. So the schools that are listed under tier 1, they have finished in the AP poll 6 to 10 times. If you're in tier 2, it's 2 to 5 times. Tier 3 is once, and tier 4, they have not been in there. So looking around at these tiers, you're seeing some of the blue bloods, obviously, up in tier 1. You have the Alabamas, you have the Georgias, the LSUs. You move down to tier 2, that's where NC State sits. A key takeaway here is, look at these other schools that are in the same tier.
Yeah.
You have USC, Southern Cal. You have Florida State, Texas, Wisconsin, Florida, Washington, who just played for a national championship. Although this tier is being used for revenue distribution based on the college football video game that's coming out this summer, which NC State's receiving $60K per year for their inclusion in that, my bigger point here is this tier would reflect to you that NC State is growing a model of success. The proof is in the pudding, being that they're repeatedly finding themselves in the AP poll at the end of these seasons.
The other thing about this is when you look at and talk about, hey, what is NC State doing to grow in this way, and how do they end up with all of these other major brands? The answer is very simple. This is a group that continues to win. How many times have I said everything that NC State wants is on the other side of winning? That is not hyperbole. That is not a joke. That is not an exaggeration. It's facts. It's just a fact of the matter. And the more that you look into NC State's recent history, like we've talked about, you and I have talked about this ad nauseum, Dorn has raised the floor. The floor has been raised. And so the only question is, can we raise the ceiling? The floor has been raised to that level where you're on par with a USC, with a Florida State, with a Texas in terms of their floor. The difference is Texas has been to the college football playoff. Florida State has been to the college football playoff. Washington has been to the college football playoff. You need to have that spike year that then, even if you're not on the quote-unquote tier 1, according to EA Sports, you are still in a position where you can argue from a position of strength, hey, we have shown up and shown out every single time. And when it is our time to have our year or 2 years, or when it is time to reestablish who we are, we've shown that as well.
To a certain extent, we've kind of been beating it into the ground, but it just rolls back to brand recognition. And NC State football is becoming a brand associated with consistency. They're becoming a brand associated with winning. Everything we've talked about heading into this season and the aspirations that they have, in the article attached to this tier, these tiers will remain fluid. So as NC State continues to win, they can continue to move up a tier. That means more money for the program, more eyes on the program, better recruits. That's what winning does for you. You get better everything in return. But to look through the rest of this second tier, you see all of these other brands that a lot of folks would consider to be big-time college football brands. And there you have NC State sitting right next to them. And I think it just really feels like NC State football has flown under the radar for the last decade or so. As we stand now, Dave Doeren's repeatedly hitting 8, 9, still looking for that 10th win season. Fingers crossed it'll be this year. The national college football crowd probably doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to NC State, but then again, you look up at the end of the year, they're sitting there in the final AP poll and they have 9 wins and they're going to a notable bowl. So like I mentioned, the proof is in the pudding. NC State is rolling out consistent 8, 9, and then again, hopefully 10-win seasons here. And as you continue to do that, your tier will increase, not just for the payouts of college football video games, but the tier of overall respect, brand awareness, everything like I just mentioned. So maybe folks will see this as insignificant because this is payouts for a college football video game. But again, bigger picture here, this is not insignificant. This is a big deal that NC State is sitting amongst some of these other premier brands. A quick little jab here at Florida State. All the moaning and whining and we deserve this and we deserve that, they're in the same tier as NC State. And I know that's a whole nother argument based on viewership and TV dollars and all that as well. For me, I also look at what are you doing on the football field? They're rolling in arguably similar numbers to NC State. Now, again, they've had a higher ceiling than we have. I get that as well. But overall, over the span of a 10-year period, NC State has had almost comparable success to that of Florida State's.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that I want to make sure that everybody takes away from this is this. These, like Grayson said, these lists are fluid. Yes. Nobody is stuck in one place for forever. Think about this. Oklahoma State is on that list. If you roll it back about 5-6 years, do they still fall into tier 1? You know, you look at that list and you see Iowa on that list. If you roll it back 5-6 years, is Iowa on that list? You know, so there is no determination that, hey, these programs are just who they are. And here's a really fun fact. I was one of the biggest Michigan fans in the world growing up. During that Rich Rod, Brady Hoke era, they wouldn't have been tier 1 on this list, even with as massive of a brand as they were. So, or as they are. So the reality is, again, win. Just win. That is the most important thing. There is nothing more that should matter or that will matter for NC State than winning. When you win on the field, you win the recruiting battles. Players no longer feel the need to say, well, wait a minute. If I want to compete for a national championship and go to the league, I've got to go to Notre Dame. I've got to go to Clemson. I've got to go to Bama. I've got to go to Michigan. They're looking and saying, I can stay home. I can win championships. And I can, go to the league and all that good stuff. NC State has shown the ability to put players in the league. We've shown player development. Now it's about, again, showing players you can win the championship here because North Carolina, while it is known as the Hoop State, produces a ton of top talent in terms of football as well. But they cannot retain that talent because we have not won the championships necessary to keep a Dexter Lawrence, to keep a Bryce Love, to keep guys like that in the state.
And if I may, before I wrap this portion up, I'll take one more quick jab. Find Duke on this tier list for me. They're in tier 4. You know what that means? They have not finished in the AP final poll in the last 10 years. So don't let Duke fans yap to you that they're building something and they're passing NC State on the field and on the recruiting trail. They have not done anything. They have nothing to show for it, and they're in tier 4.
They have 2 good years of Mike Elko to show for it. They've got 2 good years of Elko ball. Other than that, you're absolutely right. Nothing to show for it. They got
how did that just end up for them?
Well, shout out to the Aggies. Shout out to down Aggie Land. Gig 'em.
Coming up next, we're discussing the Raleigh Regional for NC State baseball and a little bit of an outlook as you project on throughout that weekend. After a quick word from our sponsors. Today's sponsor is FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home big wins of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right, $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and NC State baseball to win the Raleigh Regional. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make sure every playoff shot counts. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Middle portion of our Tuesday show. Now getting into NC State baseball. Welcome to the Raleigh Regional. We've been burned by the NCAA a number of times, but NC State baseball is hosting a Raleigh Regional this weekend. Let's get into the other teams that we'll be welcoming. So I included the big picture of the Super Regional. We'll dive into that in a couple minutes here. But NC State, they'll be hosting the Bryant Bulldogs as the 4 seed. That'll be the first game that NC State will play on Friday evening. They host the JMU Dukes, who were a bubble team but seemingly snuck in there to earn a spot in a regional. And then the South Carolina Gamecocks, a little bit of a get-back opportunity as NC State went down in the Columbia Regional just a year ago. Kenton, early inclinations here. Are you confident? Are you nervous? I'll also say this. As of now, South Carolina is the betting favorite to win this regional. Any thoughts on that?
I love when this NC State team are underdogs, and I love when they're going to have to play somebody else who's had a number by their name during a lot of this season, because it seems to be that's the only time that we can show up and perform. But very seriously, there is something to be said about the fact that, again, we're hosting this regional and we're still getting disrespected. That's when NC State performs at their best clip. That is when Pac-9 performs, when they're really ready to go, when nobody gives them a shot, when it's, when the quote-unquote odds are stacked against you or the smart money is betting against you. That's where NC State shows you just how dumb that smart money is sometimes. And so, I'm excited for this. And I really and truly believe that this team can do something special. Because do you remember what happened the last time NC State got knocked out of the ACC tournament by Duke? We went to Omaha. It's time to go back. Elliott Avon is getting up there. It's time to, send them out on the highest of high notes you can possibly do. And I'm sure nobody would love to do that more than this team.
There are a lot of potential swirling storylines as Selection Monday kind of waged on. For a good portion there, I thought NC State was going to end up with LSU as a 2 seed in the region. Having to welcome Tommy Tanks back to Raleigh would have been something. I don't know what word you could substitute for something, but it is certainly something. I was a bit skeptical on how I'd feel if that were the case. LSU ends up going to Chapel Hill. Tommy Tanks will have to face one of our rivals. Perhaps we'll all pull for Tommy again for one weekend and one weekend only.
I will pull for the asteroid.
After that passed, I had a feeling that NC State would be welcoming Vanderbilt to Raleigh. We saw several projections over the course of the weekend that Vanderbilt may be on their way here as a 2 seed. A potential opportunity for get back on the Commodores would have also been a whole lot of something. The Vandy Whistler here in Raleigh that probably would have annoyed folks at a very rapid rate. Did not get Vanderbilt either, but we do get South Carolina. And of course, like I mentioned, our season did end last year in Columbia. We lost to South Carolina in the winner's bracket game, and then we were eliminated by Campbell down there in Founders Park. South Carolina had a pretty impressive SEC tournament run. They got hot. They looked like they might make a little bit of noise before they were snuffed out by that hot LSU team that I mentioned. But NC State should also not overlook Bryant. Of course, it is their first game of the regional. Bryant's pitching staff is extremely senior laden. They have a ton of experience, and they would love nothing more than to come into Raleigh and shock the nation on Friday.
Yeah, and here's the reality, right? Most people could not tell you where Bryant University is, but that does not matter. How many times have we seen? We know that the baseball tournament is as, if not more chaotic than the basketball, than March Madness. So it does not matter how big you are, private, public, whether or not you're a top 10 team, top 20 team. It does not matter. You have to show up ready to play every single time out in this tournament, or else you can go from hosting to out real quick. If I am correct, we weren't supposed to have a chance against the Omahogs, as they called it. They were called the Omahogs, and we didn't stand a chance. Oh, this NC State school, they ain't won nothing in forever. They've got nothing in their trophy case in the last 20, 30 years in terms of the big three. Nobody cares about them, and all of a sudden we turned it from Omahogs to Homahogs. Do not overlook this Bryant team. Show up with the right temperament, show up ready to play, show up ready to dominate, and do what needs to be done.
South Carolina's had a little bit of an up and down year, very erratic, and for that reason, I think I do like NC State to take their own regional at home. And so that will lead me into the next part of this discussion. Georgia's Athens regional, they're the 7 seed, so they are paired up with NC State's regional as the 10 seed. In Georgia's regional, they play Army on Friday. The other game is both Georgia Tech, who swept NC State, and UNC Wilmington, who swept NC State in the midweek. And so on paper, it would appear that Georgia may or may not just run through that regional, as they are a very talented team. They have the best hitter in the country in Charlie Condon. Whether you're afraid of him or not, he's only one guy. And you're looking at UNCW and Georgia Tech. Both of those teams are capable of knocking off Georgia. And so my point here is, if one of those other two teams, no disrespect to Army, I just think they're outmanned here. if Georgia Tech or UNCW are to come out of the Athens regional and NC State comes out of the Raleigh regional, NC State will host a super regional against one of those two teams. And when that happens, your road to Omaha gets a little bit brighter. And despite NC State going a combined 0-for-5 against Georgia Tech and UNC Wilmington, I would absolutely love our chances to knock them out and then win that super regional in Raleigh.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Georgia Tech and UNC Wilmington both gave us fits, and it was a situation where it wasn't even understandable why they gave us fits. At that time, Georgia Tech was not thought of as a tournament team. They just weren't. They weren't a team that people were looking at saying, oh, yeah, pencil them into the 64 that are going to be in the tournament. Nobody was thinking that. And yet they went ahead and swept us. UNC Wilmington in the midweek. I don't know what it was in the midweeks, but we were doing midweek muck dancing all year long because we couldn't get out of our own way. We couldn't stop having goofy errors. It was a comedy of errors, and it was a comedy of fluke injuries as well in some of those midweek games that, led us to and credit to both Georgia Tech and UNC Wilmington. Let me not just say this was NC State playing poorly, but I believe if NC State plays their best game, Georgia Tech plays their best game. NC State plays their best game, UNC Wilmington plays their best game, the pack advance. That's just my belief there.
So I say all that to say I really do like this draw for NC State. I think they're in a pretty favorable position to find themselves with a good shot at Omaha. And even if Georgia does win their own regional and we do have to go down to Athens, I would still like NC State then. Again, Charlie Condon is simply one player, and NC State has one of the most impressive resumes in the country with some of the most impressive road series wins in the country. So for me, Georgia, they'd be just another team on the schedule. And I think the guys would feel the very same way, having to go on the road and take 2 out of 3 from a very good team. They've done it before. They can certainly do it again. So very exciting news, very exciting draw for NC State baseball. I think they should be excited about this coming weekend, and so should the fans. We have to pack the Doak and make this the most electric atmosphere it has been in the last 6 years. NC State has not hosted one of these regionals since 2018, and the one before that was 2016. Both of those two regionals ended extremely poorly for NC State. We lost out both times in embarrassing fashion, both times. It's time that we right the ship. Like Kenta was talking about, it's time that Elliott Avent gets another run at this thing. We all know how 2021 went down. We all know him coming very close to winning an ACC title. Still hasn't happened. It's time for him to make more noise with the NC State Wolfpack. I'm very excited about this draw. I can't wait to get this thing kicked off on Friday. And again, pack the Doak. Make it as loud as it has been in the last 6 years. Can't wait to see it. Rounding out our Tuesday show, we're taking a look at spring football transfer portal grades and where NC State is average. We'll touch on this in just a second after a quick word from our sponsors. Last couple minutes of our Tuesday show. Like I mentioned, now getting into spring football transfer portal window grades for every team in the ACC. Here we go. So I'll blow through these pretty quickly. You're going to hear some very surprising grades here. And again, this is for the spring transfer portal window. And I kind of consider that from like March on. I don't look at early January, some of February. That feels like winter to me. So just spring. Here we go for the ACC grades. Boston College, D. Cal, B. Clemson, D. Keep in mind that Clemson did not make any additions, and they got a D. We'll circle back to that in just a second. Duke, C. Florida State, C. Georgia Tech, C. Louisville, B-. Miami, A-. Dirty Foot Club, D. D for Dirty Foot Club. NC State, C. A C. Okay, chew on that. Pittsburgh, D. SMU, B+. Stanford, D. Syracuse, B. Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest all have Ds. Kenton, give me your biggest surprise on this list.
Grayson, you and I both attended NC State, right? And I would assume that everybody listening to this podcast has done some form of formal education outside of their home. No disrespect to the homeschoolers, correct? That's a fair assumption. Most people would have done a little bit of schooling with, other people in the population, correct? Now, Grayson, maybe I'm crazy. And fans, y'all help me out as well. Maybe I'm losing my mind. But last time I checked, if there was an assignment and you didn't turn anything in, your grade was an automatic 0. Am I forgetting something?
That's how I grew up.
So Clemson doesn't get a single player out of the transfer portal and gets one less letter grade than a team who picked up multiple depth pieces, a potentially starting safety, and that team were just like, man. I'm so confused. I'm legitimately confused as to how a team who replenished many of their needs, did what they needed to, got very quality talent, had one of the top 15 portal classes in the nation, gets a C. I mean, what are the folks at Rivals and Yahoo doing? What is this?
Like I mentioned, I sort of consider the spring window to be like March, April, and May. So in that particular window, NC State has lost Julian Gray and Nick Campbell. They have gained defensive lineman Chaz Wallace from Colorado. They've gained KJ Martin, the safety from Akron, and they just most recently gained Jihad Carter, the safety coming from Ohio State. Jihad Carter is widely being considered a potential starter for this defense. We picked him up as a potential depth piece. He may just win that starting job back there as the starting safety. How in the world is that a C? You're picking up a starter on defense, and that's a C. I don't know. Maybe Rivals is not expecting much out of Jihad Carter, but I think when you consider who he's about to play for in Tony Gibson, I do think a C is a very lazy grade for NC State, but I think there's a lot of lazy grades across this board. You talk about Clemson. Again, legitimately did not add a single transfer portal player to their roster. How you get anything above an F is beyond me. Miami is one. They are the highest one on here, an A-. Whether you're buying the hype in Miami or not buying the hype, they did pick up very quality players just based on the numbers that they're coming into the portal with. You look at Cam Ward, you're looking at Damian Martinez, they just picked up from Oregon State. Great running back. So to an extent, I would understand Miami's grade being that high. Louisville being a B-, okay. SMU, I'm not even going to pretend to know who SMU picked up for them to receive a B+. So pretty head-scratching across the board here. Cal has a B. I think that's actually accurate for Cal. They picked up a ton of talent in the spring transfer portal window. But is that even going to matter for Cal? Respectfully, that might be a jab too far because we do have to play them this year. But still, a C for NC State. I feel a little disrespected here. Again, we only picked up 3 players. I fully expect all 3 of them to make an impact on the field come fall.
And, you talk about replacing Nick Campbell and getting Brandon Cleveland a good backup because he's a monster, but he's a defensive lineman. At the end of the day, even the best of interior defensive linemen, they have to come out of the game due to the nature of the physicality of the position they play and just their size. Like that's the reality. We were not going to get it done without having a sufficient backup there because then you're talking about having to move Davin Van up and down the line constantly, and he's not coming off the field. So you were going to hurt somewhere. And, getting Chaz in here, big deal. And getting Jihad in here when we talk about a lot of safeties that are on the roster, very young guys or position change guys or whatever the case may be. So having an experienced all ACC safety back there means a lot. So, I'll say this much. I look at these grades just like I look at recruiting grades, just like I look at everything else. Hey, more power to you, but that's not the end-all, be-all of this thing. You still have to put that ball down, and you still got to move other people against their will for however long every Saturday in the upcoming fall.
Since I've been taking so many shots, I'll take one last one before we get out of here. I think the most accurate grade on this list comes from Dirty Footland. They got a D. I think that's accurate. Because in the spring football window, they have stunk it up. In fact, they stunk it up so bad, Mac Brown pulled their spring game off of national television. He didn't want folks to see what they have going on over there in Dirty Footland. So poking a little fun here as we get out of here on Tuesday, D in fact does stand for Dirty Foot Club. Actually, before we get out of here, quick shout out to Abby Lamp, who is a 2-time women's cheese rolling world champion. That is an absolutely hilarious thing that NC State can hang their hat on. Before 2 years ago when she won it for the first time, didn't know that cheese rolling was even a thing. And if you watch the video, it is insane. I don't know how anyone walks away with anything less than a severe concussion. But Abby Lamp, who is an alumni of NC State, has now won it not once, but twice.
But 2 times.
hilarious. Shout out to Abby Lamp. Congratulations for being a 2-time women's world cheese rolling champion. Hilarious to even say that out loud. That'll do it for us here on Tuesday. As always, thank you all so much for joining us. Be sure to hit that like button. Drop your comments in the comment box. Tell us what you think about NC State landing in Tier 2 of the EA Sports college football video game payouts and what that means for the bigger picture. Tell us what you think about NC State baseball bringing the Raleigh Regional back home and their chances to make it out of said regional. And tell us what you think about the spring football transfer portal grades coming from rivals. Head scratching, to say the least. Hit that subscribe button if you have not already, and we will see you all tomorrow. Until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.